and getting nothing in return. Getting nothing in return except that you get to watch the most expensive fan fiction movie about democracy ever produced. I mean, look at the Democrats. Kamala Harris was just appointed as the nominee. She wasn't voted for. This is straight up succession, not election. There were no primaries. She hasn't had to outline her policy platform, and no one needs her to do that. All she has to do is to not be Donald Trump. This is the logic of demonization versus policy debate as a campaign strategy. No candidate has to win your approval as long as the whole election is framed in the lesser of two evils scenario. And what's the point of that? To make the pre-programmed win seem plausible, that's all. And to not leave any opening for dissent to manifest that might make the win seem implausible. Because, for instance, if voters actually have demands of this candidate or that candidate, and the candidate fails to address those demands, then it could cast doubt upon their eventual victory. And inevitably, if a candidate does address voter demands, well, that will always end up alienating some other faction of voters. So we don't talk about issues. We don't talk about how to deal with issues. We just rally behind our party's candidate in lockstep, because the other party's candidate is literally the devil incarnate. When you're operating in the lesser of two evils framework, you're always going to have decidedly low expectations of your chosen candidate, and that's perfect when the election is already fraudulent in the first place. So that's it. Yes, I said rigging, and don't think for a second, don't you imagine that that's a conspiracy theory, that the U.S. rigs elections. But Guyana, for a second, don't you imagine that that's a conspiracy theory, that the U.S. rigs elections. But between 1946 and 2000, America is documented to have interfered with, tampered with, malignly influenced, or outright rigged at least 88 elections from Europe to Latin America to Asia to Africa. So again, if you think that they'll do this everywhere else, but your so-called democracy is pristine, I would have to ask you why you think so. Why would it be more important to the power structure to control the outcome of an election in, say, Guyana, than it would be for them to control the outcome of an election in the United States of America? Because yes, Guyana is one of the countries where America rigged elections in the past. I'm telling you, I don't care who you vote for, because power doesn't care who you vote for, because the outcome is not determined by you. You know, Biden stepped aside because his pre-programmed victory could never be convincing. But look, Biden himself, the fact of Biden, a man who is literally in late-stage senility, a man who is visibly disintegrating before our eyes, the very fact that he was not only president, but was absolutely going to be run for another term, despite being a cadaver on strings, that should let you know that power does not reside in that office. In an oligarchy, and your so-called democracy is only performed as a distraction to keep you from noticing that fact. Now, for this election in the U.S., as I've said, Harris and Trump are just mascots representing two different factions of the OCGFC. And it's going to be just like what happened in Venezuela. The only way that Trump can win is by trying to out-rig the election rigging of the Democrats. But the Democrats are the incumbents, like Maduro was. So they have the advantage of overseeing the succession, and Harris is likely to win. The only thing that Trump can do is to try to boost his own popularity to the point that Harris's pre-programmed victory looks less plausible. But like I said before, it's not musical chairs where both candidates are walking in circles around the chair until the music stops, and then they have to race for the seat. Kamala is already in the seat, just like Maduro, and it's harder to get someone out of that seat than it is to just sit in it. So it looks like the neocons will probably stay in the White House. And that just means that the real battle between the military-industrial complex OCGFC and the global-oriented OCGFC, that battle is just going to go on a while longer. But if you're fool enough to think that you have to drop everything in order to ensure that Kamala Harris will win and Trump will lose, well, then you're literally like someone who can watch those old Roadrunner cartoons and still get worried and anxious about whether or not the coyote is going to catch him. I mean, I know it's important for you to think that you have some kind of control, but the truth is, the reality is, you're not writing this story, and you're not writing how this story goes. And as long as you think that you are writing how this story goes or participating in it in any way whatsoever, then that just ensures that you will always be voting will never do anything for social and political change except to ensure that it won't happen. Boeing, for example, just used your government to make around $20 billion. Boeing, Raytheon, and all the other merchants of death and destruction. They just got $20 billion of your money to keep the genocide going in Gaza. That's their policy. Zionism is their policy. Genocide is their policy, and they're doing it for money. And they give almost evenly to the Democrats as they do to the Republicans, except they give slightly more to the Democrats. And it's almost even between what they give to Kamala Harris and to Donald Trump. They contributed a bit more to Harris. I shouldn't actually say contribute, I should say invest, because they give that money as an investment from which they expect astronomical returns, which they will get. These are the entities that control your policy. It's not your ballot, it's their billions. Your government is captured, and your country has been captured, and power and decision-making has been transferred from the public sector to the private sector.